What's one green flag, something that they should look for? And then what's one red flag that a high achieving woman in particular should look for in a partner?
The green flag is definitely that emotional safety. After a few months, you should be able to tell whether you feel emotionally safe with them. And what that will look like in the relationship is he open to your suggestion? How well does he listen to you? Do you feel comfortable expressing A, B, and C to him?
hmm
And just asking yourself those questions like, how open are you with him?
I'm the former queen of taking red flags and putting them into the shape of a heart. I'm Ashley, and this is the Maverick Mompreneur podcast, where you're free and encouraged to own your desire to create and scale an impactful, discoverable online brand and business, a business that's aligned with your mission, lifestyle desires, personality, and zone of genius without wasting your time on the hustle and grind hamster wheel that is social media. Can I get an amen? Sis, you are a maverick, an original, willing to stand out in your authenticity, defy expectations, and do life and business outside the box. In our world, if it's not aligned with who we are, it's a hard pass or a brave pivot. So if you're here for the powerful identity shift and transformation from boss babe or boss mom to aligned CEO, building a one-of-a-kind, influential, hustle-free online business that will produce long-term impact and multiple streams of income while building yourself in the process, well, pop in those AirPods, grab that cup of coffee or glass of wine, and let's get growing. Hello, hello. Welcome back to the Maverick Mompreneur, everyone. I'm your host, Ashley, and I have such a treat for you today. On today's episode, I am joined by self-love and relationship coach and therapist. Also happens to be a client and friend of mine, Raelara Tilden is joining us, and I can't wait for you to hear from her and all of her wisdom. Coach Ray, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm glad you're here.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Well, I have so many questions for you, so let's just dive right in. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and then take us to the moment when you knew you wanted to do more than your private practice therapy work? So how did you make that transition to doing what you do now, which is a combination of both?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I got licensed as a licensed marriage and family therapist back in 2017. As soon as I finished all my hours as an intern, I opened a public practice in 2017. Did that for 2 years. I had the full-blown public practice with employees and intern therapists. That burnt me out being the CEO and all of that practice. There was so much red tape, so much red tape with dealing with insurances and all of that. I got burnt out pretty quickly. So by 2019, I was burnt out and I started real estate. I started real estate because I knew that although I loved being a therapist, all of the administration and oversight really burnt me out quite quickly. I tried real estate for 2 years, wasn't a good fit. That was during the pandemic, which was really great. It was a great time to do that during the pandemic and kind of not do so much the therapy side of things with clients. During that time, I was just managing the other therapists in the practice. And so after I realized that real estate was not for me, there was a business coach and also a therapist, an LCSW, who went across my Facebook feed, and she talked about coaching. And I was already I don't know where it came from, but coaching was already in my mind. Also, I didn't mention I'm also licensed as a therapist in other states just so that I could have a farther reach and help more women or work with more women. And so I got a hold of this coach and she talked to me about going into coaching. And it also didn't dawn on me back then that the women that I worked with, they weren't what we would call diagnosable. So they weren't clinically diagnosable, meaning that with the DSM, the manual that we use as mental health professionals, they didn't meet that criteria. And so technically, I didn't need a license to work with them. And just honestly, once I went back to seeing clients, the one-on-one for that year. So between 2020 and 2022, I was doing real estate and doing therapy at the same time. I started back in about end of 2021 to 2022, I started seeing more clients individually. And I realized that that format, that style was not doing it for me anymore, the one-on-one. And I got burnt out of that quickly as well. well. And so when I thought about coaching and being able to work with not only women in the states that I was licensed, but also women throughout the states, and globally, really, it was just like, wow, this is something I can do. I could have a further reach, and I could pretty much do what I'm doing as a therapist. Because again, it is a gray area between therapy and coaching, but I really, really like the more action oriented, strategically format of coaching, in that all the knowledge that I had as working as a therapist for about 10 years now, putting into programs in my digital product as a relationship coach, and the work that I do with my clients now as a coach. And so I know that was a long-winded answer, but I hope I answered it, Ashley.
You absolutely did. I love what you're doing, and I have a personal tie to it because when I was going through my divorce, I saw for a while a former, I guess she still is, a licensed clinician as well. She was a therapist, but she transitioned her business into the life coaching model for some of the same reasons. And I chose to work specifically with her because I really wanted someone to, not because I've been to traditional therapy for different reasons and did certainly during my marriage and things like that, but I really wanted someone to shoot it to me straight and kind of tell me what to do. I'm an action taker, and I really wanted someone to tell me, okay, here's, what we just talked about, try this. She was able to do that with the life coaching piece of it, and I benefited so greatly from that almost hybrid model. So hearing that you're doing the same, I know from experience how powerful that is when someone brings their expertise from the field and years of clinical work with clients, but with the modality of coaching. I know from personal experience it can be so transformative, and I just love that you're doing that work. But one thing that came up, because I didn't realize that you had done real estate for a stint too, how, as someone who obviously is able to manage more than one thing at a time, I know there's a lot of listeners who either have a 9 to 5 or who have one thing that they're doing currently for work, but they're wanting to build a side hustle and or wanting to turn a side hustle into something more. How do you balance that? I mean, I know from my experience, some of the pitfalls of trying to do that and tips, but from your experience, how have you managed transitioning in between two different things? Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Yes, that makes complete sense. So in the beginning, from my public practice, having it structured with other therapists and working under me and taking insurance, that one was quite simple because at that time I was able to stop seeing clients because I had the staff to take the client caseload, which gave me the time to go into real estate school. It was the administrative part that burnt me out with that. So I was able to do those, simultaneously. That was pretty easy. However, the way that I went from only taking cash pay clients, which is how I am in my private practice now, and getting out of real estate and then going into coaching, real estate was just able to naturally die down. You don't do anything in real estate. It just kind of goes. I made the connections I needed to in order to be able to do referral type business with real estate. And so going from my private practice, cash pay private practice into coaching is where that balance and has been and continues to be a challenge with balancing all of that. So I would say about 9 months or most of last year, 2024, what I had to do is scale the private practice. And what that looked like was, because I was still on the one-on-one model. I still do, that type of one-on-one work. So what I had to do is increase my fees, which came naturally just because of inflation and all of that. And then I didn't mention that I'm also a supervisor for other therapists. And so for the listeners that aren't familiar with the process, just like doctors, they go through residency, therapists go through internships. And as a pre-licensed, we call them pre-licensed therapists, you have to have a supervisor that you work under, just like a resident has to have an attending to work under. And so I also supervise other therapists. And so what I did with that is, since I am licensed in other states besides Nevada, so I'm in Nevada, Hawaii, and California. And so what I did with that is I also scaled in my supervision offerings. And so that helped me also kind of buy back my time and scale that business so that I can have the time for the coaching business. What I do want to mention here, because I think it's important, Ashley, is that these businesses, I'm still self-employed. You know what I mean? So my experience, I know, is different because I was able to scale those businesses. So I would imagine it would look different different from someone that is a 9 to 5, because that would be if you're salaried or if you're hourly, that would look like asking for a raise in order to, make more money, or however that looks in a 9 to 5 world. I want to make note of that because I know that my experience is different, because all of these businesses I'm referring to are mine, right? Where I was able to increase my fees, and that was a decision I just had to make. With that though, once I did that, I made sure to structure my week or my days of the week in that these days, X amount of days, I'm committed to this business. X amount of days, I'm committed to this business. Because as you know, and why, how we connected is growing this coaching business is a lot of work, right? There's a lot that goes into it. It's a lot of time, at least in the front end, right? In the beginning. But in order for me to have the time to do both, to answer your question, to balance that, I had to scale one business so that I could have the time to work on the other business.
Yeah, that completely resonates with me. I've been thinking about some similar topics as things have happened with one of the streams of revenue that I still continued to have, which was how I started my business. Same type of process, but completely different in the sense that I used to be, I don't know if we've talked about this before, but I know my audience knows I was involved for a couple years in the social selling network marketing space before I decided that I didn't align with that and didn't want to do it anymore. But I was able, due to work and then also timing, to scale that business to the point where I could have the space and time to launch my coaching business, which was a huge, huge blessing. And I think that's something important to bring up, which you did bring up, is that transition. It's going to look different for everyone, but starting a business from scratch, whether you're in a 9 to 5 or whether you have your own business and you're doing that, it's not easy. And there is strategy behind that. And unless you have some sort of financial backing outside of your own self, that is part of the transition, right? Is that realistic, real financial piece where you need to almost buy yourself some time. And so that's something to consider. Glad that you brought that up, because I don't think that I've had anyone really speak to that before. So thank you for bringing up that very real part of starting an online business, transitioning from whatever you're doing, whether it's a 9 to 5 or your own practice.
One other thing I wanted to add is I commented on going from one practice or one business to the other and scaling. What I didn't mention is the time with the family, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's another reason why I had to kind of buy back my time, is because I didn't have to do that. I could have just used all my spare time to create the other business, right? And I'm sure a lot of people will do that. That's maybe their only choice, is to do that. But with everything that I've done and through schooling, like that's what I had to do. And so when I didn't have to do that again, that's why I chose to go the other route, because now balancing that time with, because I can easily fall into that trap, as high achieving women, it's like when we do something we love, I still have to check myself, because I'm like, okay, I shouldn't be doing this right now. I need to be paying attention to my little guy, right? Or I should go outside in the pool and be with them instead of here watching TV on my computer. And that's very important to mention too, because right now I'm at a place where I've already sacrificed that so much, going to school and all of that before, early in my career. I'm not willing to do that now. And that's very, I just had to mention that.
Yeah, that's so important. And your self-leadership in that area is something that you bring to your clients, I'm sure. Let's talk about the work that you do as a coach. For multiple reasons, I'm really excited to dive into this with you. Number one, because you work with high-achieving women who maybe struggle with self-love or struggle with relationships when they are high-achieving in other areas. And I know from personal experience and clients, that can definitely be an area of struggle. But then there's also women who are listening who want to start a coaching practice based on their area of expertise, just like you have in the same niche or a different niche. But I'm really excited to just pick your brain on some things. So let's start with, why do you think that high achieving women often struggle with love and relationships? Sometimes they have everything else together, but maybe that's an area that's just not dialed in the way that other things are. Why do you think that that is, or what have you seen to be some patterns?
Oh, this is the meat and potatoes right here.
Yeah, I was like, let's get to the meat and potatoes. Go.
This is such a good question, and it's a loaded question because there's so many different reasons why this is. Okay, so I'll start with my experience. My experience going to school, and some of the things that I experienced in my first relationship were that were some of the struggles as a high achieving woman and having, really big goals. My ex-partner, ex-husband, although in the beginning he was all about, that's what attracted him to me, right? Was that I was this go-getter and independent and all of that. But as the relationship evolved and as I started, moving up in the ladder, right? Finishing school and opening a business, what came out at the end was a lot of resentment. I think I want to say on both ends. And I think on one of your episodes, a recent one, you mentioned this, Ashley, in one of your
Mm-hmm.
podcast episodes, resentment. And this was covert in the
Mm-hmm.
beginning until it couldn't be no longer. Jealousy, envy, resentment in the relationship, intimidation. This is what I found a lot of not only my clients, but also in my personal circle of other high achieving women where they get with partners and this ends up being the case. And then other struggles that I see and that we often have is settling, the belief that we can't have everything. We can't have that dream relationship with that dream career and dream family life. And that is a belief that a lot of women have, which causes them to settle as high achieving women. That was a huge eye opener when I was in real estate, rubbing elbows with a lot of women entrepreneurs that are 6 figures, 7 figure earners, right? And what I found was they not only had that belief, but they were living it. It was hard for me to find someone like you, Ashley, right? Where you do have, I would say, you have it all. Like you have that family, you have the relationship, you have the business, the children. A lot of the women that I was meeting that were successful in terms of business and career, maybe not in other areas, that was the belief. That was the belief. I was not going to settle for believing that because I wanted everything. That's a big one, is the belief that they can't have it all. So they end up settling. And just with being a high achiever, it's natural. We're in our masculine energy all day, right? Like creating business wise, we're in our masculine energy. So being in a relationship, really important to be in our feminine energy so that we meet that man is going to take care of us the way that we truly want to be taken care of, right? Deep down, we truly want to be treated like queens and princesses. For the most part, I mean, I believe that. But when we're so stuck in our masculine energy, that's hard to find. It's hard to attract that type of individual.
Oh my goodness. I have so many offshoot questions from just your responses there. I'll go from my experience because thank you. I do feel like I do have it all. And that's come from a process of losing everything and rebuilding. And if I had to guess at how I ended up with the partner that I have now, and I was just talking to him last night about this, I never knew it was possible to be so close to someone emotionally and just in all ways, feeling close and safe. Like I literally, and I've been married, I did not know that that existed. And I was reflecting on that and thinking, I think that that's as a result of me getting close to myself. I don't think that until the last 5 years and all the work that I've done that I really got to know and accept and love my authentic self. So when I was meeting someone in a relationship, I was always not quite that authentic person. And I think that has to be, at least for me, I'm like, that has to be how I attracted and have maintained that type of relationship. And he also, in doing his own work, some of that being very similar, but that's just my layman's conjecture as to how that happens. So I'm wondering if you can speak to the woman who wants to attract or maintain like a real authentic love and have it all. Like, how can someone meet their authentic selves? Is that it? How do you do that? How do you become someone who can have it all? Like, what are some practical tips that you would tell a friend or a
Absolutely.
client?
Yes. And no, and you are completely right. Like you said it perfectly. There's a saying, you don't attract who you want, you attract who you are, right? And you see that. I'm sure you've probably seen that in social media somewhere. There's so much that goes into that. And yes, absolutely, 100%. And when people think of like self-love, loving yourself, self-acceptance, and like self-worth, these are loaded terms in that there's so much that goes into that work, like within all of those, within self-love and building your self-worth and all that, there's everything else. There is self-compassion, there is self-forgiveness, there is forgiveness, that there is being intentional, right? There's being your own cheerleader, having your own back. There's all of these things that go into that statement. You attract who you are, not what you want. And that's exactly what you said, is I had to truly find, like, I truly had to love myself and accept myself, be my true authentic self before I was able to meet my partner, right? And he did the same work. And so
Mhm.
what that looks like you building that relationship with yourself. This can be a complete, like, whole podcast on its own. So I'll try to kind of shorten it a little bit, but
No, no, go
um,
for it. We'll just run with this theme. I'm loving this.
so creating the relationship with yourself, right? Like what does that look like? As a society, systemically, we are taught to, as women, right? And depending on your culture that and your religion and all these other factors that go into play, the message is that we're supposed to put ourselves last. Everyone, children, spouses, husbands, they go above our needs. And that is just so embedded into everything, right? And
Mhm.
with that, you lose yourself, right? And so when we
Mhm.
say authentic self, it's like really going back to before all of the distorted beliefs and patterns that are created that we adopt through our parents and all of that stuff. To go back to ourself is to really find out, okay, who, before all that, how was I? What do I
Mhm.
like? What do I want? I had a client. She was married for 20 years. She was 19 years old when she got married.
Oh,
She came to me in her 40s, right? And
wow.
she did not have an identity because when she got married, identity as wife. Then she had children,
Right.
identity as mother, right? And so when she came to me, she was like, she wanted out of the relationship. She wasn't happy, but she didn't know who she was. So what that looks like is building that relationship with yourself, treating yourself the way that you would your partner to treat you, right? If you
Mhm.
want that emotional security, you want that emotional safety, then you're going to create that for yourself. And I just talked to another client about this last week, creating that emotional safety. That means,
Mhm.
okay, so when you think of, it's easier to think about it with a partner, right? So with a partner, you're like, okay, what does it mean to be emotionally safe? It means that I can express to you what I like, what I don't like, what bothered me, what made me sad, what made me happy, without judgment, right? With pure acceptance,
Mhm.
right, from a partner, right? And
Yep.
they're going to listen to you, and they're going to be there, and they're not going to criticize, or you're going to be safe, and you're good with, and you're okay, you're good doing that for yourself. You have to do that for yourself. So when you make a
Mhm.
mistake, and whatever judgments you have, not judging yourself, not criticizing yourself, giving yourself that compassion, that if your best friend or your sister were able to do this, what would you tell them? Well, you telling yourself that too. That resonates
Mhm.
with a lot with my clients, when I take the focus off of them and put it onto someone else, and how loving, right? And
Yep.
the loving things they would say to someone that they love, and how they recognize that is not what they say to themselves. And so I would say that's one strategy to think of when someone is being hard and criticizing themselves.
That's so true. And I think I've had to do a lot of work around how did I find myself as being a match for certain treatments? And when I've really had to take a hard look at how emotionally or verbally abusive had I been to myself for a really long time. And if we accept treating ourselves or speaking these horrible things to ourselves of judgment, criticism, non-acceptance, it's so much easier to accept that from someone else. But if our internal script or the way we speak to ourselves is the way we would speak to our best friend or the person that we love the most, if we speak to ourselves that way, it becomes so much more obvious when someone else breaks that or comes at us in a way that, like, oh, absolutely not. It's not familiar. What you said, I'm like, oh, yeah, that is a part of the process. I don't think I had thought about that super consciously, though.
Yeah, and so with a lot of my clients experience, because a lot of them come right, like when they're done in the relationship, like when
Mm-hmm.
they've done, and this, yeah, they're done in the relationship. They know, they feel like it's anxiety and depression. And yeah, I mean, when you're
Yep.
suppressing your emotions, it does manifest into anxiety, these symptoms, right, that we call
Yep.
anxiety and depression. Once they do the work and they start building the relationship with themselves, start treating themselves nicely, doing for themselves, and then when they start dating, because after they make what they're doing for themselves the norm, treating
Mm-hmm.
themselves well, taking themselves out, saying nice things to themselves, giving themselves, like showing compassion to themselves, that then becomes the new norm. And so when
Yes.
when when you're dating, that other partner isn't giving that to you, then it doesn't feel right anymore, right?
Yeah.
Opposed to when you were doing it to yourself, and then it was like you mentioned, it was easier to accept that, right? And
Yeah.
yeah.
And then you realize that it's better. I obviously, my first go round post divorce was not the relationship that I'm in now, but it was that stepping stone to realizing a lot of these things, that I was responsible for the standards that I set for how I would allow someone to treat me, even if that meant being alone. And I think sometimes that's hard too, because we feel like as women, we're not complete without a partner, or, I don't know if that's, there's all kinds of factors, cultural and whatever else, but I do remember getting to the point where it's either what I want and how I expect others to treat me in basic human decency and how I treat myself, or nothing. And I had to get to a point where I would be okay alone and complete myself, if you will, in a sense of being okay. Yes, did I always want to have a partner? Of course, but get to the point where I'm like, you know what, if I'm alone for the next 10 years and then I meet the love of my life, great, but we're not going to do anything below the standard that I have. But it's hard, especially for someone who maybe doesn't have kids yet and desires to have children, and there's lots of pressures and things that go into that. Is there anything else, any other tips that you could recommend for someone who is maybe, let's go back to the being in our feminine piece, because I do think as a business owner, it is extremely hard sometimes to shift out of that and do that consciously and then be in our feminine. And I even find that sometimes my partner will have to, he's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like yesterday, he told me I was all wound up about something work-wise, and he just said, okay, let's take a breath. Have you breathed in the last 5 minutes since you've been saying all these words? I'm like, no, I haven't. Thank you. And co-regulating is one thing, but how can we do that for ourselves and make that transition when we do have to be in masculine energy, of course, to get things done? And that's part of who we are. But how do you make space for both?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And it is something I work on every day, to be honest, because being an entrepreneur and being high achieving and all of that, I want to say for me, it started in childhood, being the eldest of six, right? Like
Oh,
it really started, and for a lot of people, it does too. It creates this high achieving part, right? So, okay, feminine energy, right? Being in the flow, being patient, allowing opposed to controlling, right? Because when we're in our masculine energy, we have deadlines, we have a to-do list, we have all of these goals, and it's really, really that action goal oriented energy, masculine energy, right? Trying to shut it off when you're done with. I know for you probably too, Ashley, it's hard because I don't go to an office anymore like I used to, so there's not that hard shift, right? I'm working right now from my home office, which is the bedroom on the bottom floor. To say all that, I believe it's harder for us to even do this because there's not that hard shift where, okay, I'm going from the office and I'm coming home, where it's more, it seems like that would be a lot easier. So being home and working from home, when I'm done with work, after 5 or 6 o'clock, and I start my family time, right? I have to remind myself, in the beginning at least, I had to remind myself, like, okay, I need to let all of that go and kind of relax. So how I see it come up for me still with the relationship piece is trying to plan vacations, right? Not that we shouldn't or that we can't, but allowing our partners to take that lead. Knowing in order to shift from the constant doing and trying to make this happen, reminding ourselves that we could sometimes just be still and it will still happen, especially for the things that are out of our control.
Ooh, that's hard though. It's a struggle.
Yeah, definitely. The whole focus on things that we can control and kind of let go, right? Because the letting go part is part of that feminine energy, right? Because the masculine energy is, how am I going to achieve this? How am I going to do this?
Yep.
Right. And so in some situations, especially the ones that it is out of our control, we really look at it because we feel like so much things are in our control because we're doers. We're constant doing in our masculine energy. And sometimes it's just that reminder, like, okay, I just need to breathe, like your partner told you, right? Like breathe and let go and have that inner knowing that everything is going to work out in our best interest, and just allowing, which is hard, right? Because it's letting go of that control, that kind of action oriented energy.
I'm just thinking of how this, for high achieving women, could be such a self-perpetuating cycle. Like you get into, okay, I am responsible for all the to-dos and deadlines and getting things done, and that's the role. And especially for someone, if you're single or a single mom or just single in general, and you're doing things on your own, trying to then have a relationship where you're also soft and reliant and allowing things to happen, but also thinking, well, but it's on me. How do I get things was done. I can see that being a relationship challenge for sure. And I've never really thought of it from that perspective, like for myself. But I think that I do remember distinctly, because I've been with my partner now for about 2.5 years. And the first year was very, very different than the last, I'd say, year and a half. And some of that was I was not willing to accept any help from him whatsoever. Even when I needed it, it was like, absolutely not. I couldn't do it. I almost pushed him away in a sense because I wanted to do everything myself when he's literally can do, my daughter thinks he can do anything, like he's Superman. He can do so much. Like if I had something that breaks, he's like, oh, let me come over and fix it. I'm like, no, absolutely not. I'll call someone. Not allowing for any of that. And there were obviously multiple factors, but one thing that I do know I did consciously is allow him to help me and know that his help isn't coming with expectations for something from me because of that. Like I had all this past stuff that kind of blocked me from not trying to, like you were saying, control everything and be in control of all the things and how they were going to get done and, you know, not allow for anyone else to step in. But I think that's been such an important part of our relationship growing, is allowing a masculine man to do what he wants to do, which is help and protect and provide and all of those things. And even if I don't technically need it, it's part of what makes the relationship dynamic work. You know, I found that, but not really knowing why. So it's making some pieces come together for me.
Yeah. And I want to say, I don't think there's one client that I've worked with that accepting, receiving help, support, it hasn't been a problem. I can confidently say just about every single high achieving woman I've worked with, this has been a thing that they've had to overcome, including myself.
Mm-hmm.
When I got with my current partner now, within the first 2 years, I started working on this because he is a very masculine man and we would butt heads a lot because we were both in our masculine energy, right?
Uh-huh.
And I knew I wanted a masculine man. Boy, when I got him, it was like, okay, well, he's trying to take the control away from me. Well,
Uh-huh.
that's kind of what we think.
Uh-huh.
Absolutely not. He just wanted to be in his masculine with doing the thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Supporting me and all of that. But me thinking I could do it on my own. I could do it on my own. I'm independent. I don't need, you to do that. And just that idea that we're not able to ask for help. We're not able to, that desire to have to do it all on our own. That comes from somewhere. That's another episode, but that definitely
Mm-hmm.
does stem from somewhere. That inability to receive assistance, help definitely does from somewhere. And it's something that all the high achieving women that I've worked with, it's been a struggle and something that we've worked through. The way that I worded it to them to kind of switch that perspective is think of yourself and how helpful you like to be. Think about a time that you offered your help to someone that you wanted to help because you care or love for them, right? And they told you no. No, that's okay. I got it on my own, right? How did that make you feel? Like you're taking that away from them, right? Because people that love you and care for you, they want to help you. They want to make your life easier. When you declined, or some of them will even take it as rejection, how do you think that makes them feel? So when I changed the perspective to look at it in a way that when you want to help someone and how does that make you feel? Then it clicks for most women, for most people, it clicks like,
Yeah.
wow, that makes complete sense. Because I'm like, well, the people that love you and generally have your best interest at heart, they're going to feel that way. So you are taking away from them because they do care for you and they do want to help you. And that makes it a little bit easier for them to, accept help or even ask for it.
That makes a lot of sense. I think that will be very healing to some people who hear that.
I hope so.
And from a business sense too, I mean, even things like letting go of tasks, delegating, hiring a virtual assistant, offloading things that you can do okay or do well, but maybe there's someone else that can do it better. That's hard. I really do struggle with that too. Sometimes is letting go of doing everything myself. And so I think there's translations from relationships to work for that same area.
Oh yeah, definitely. It bleeds into all areas of life, whether it's your relationship, whether it's your business, whether it's your job. It does. It definitely translates to all aspects of our lives or our relationships. Because I mean, our businesses and careers also is a relationship, just in a different form.
It is for sure all intertwined. And maybe that's because of the nature of entrepreneurship. But I really do think, what is that saying? How you do one thing is how you do everything. And there's certain exceptions to that. But in a lot of cases, it's really true. If you improve in in one area, so say self-love or being your authentic self, that absolutely translates to every other area of life and work.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree.
Which is, I think, part of why entrepreneurship is such an ongoing journey of developing just as a human being. And that is such an important part. I remember one of my best friends is a guy named Derek, and he's a very, very, very successful entrepreneur. I met him when I was still teaching. This was like 15 years ago, and he's always been an entrepreneur. And so I remember being baffled by the whole process and why was he always reading these books about the mind and like, what is going on with this guy? But it was fascinating and I loved talking to him and I'd always go to him for advice. But what I now realize is that those two things are absolutely interrelated. You have to manage your inner world just as much as your business when you're creating something. It's so important. Again, another podcast episode, huh? Before I forget to ask you this, because I feel like I don't want to let this go unasked, because I know your products, obviously as a coach, I know your products and the things that you offer, but I'm wondering for someone who's wanting to work on either self-love or things that would help them to achieve more of that balance within their feminine energy and masculine energy, getting things done. So what kind of tools do you offer currently in your coaching business that they could take advantage of?
Right now, I have a few programs. I have a ton of like workbooks and journals that they can download for free on my website. You know, just depending on where they're at in their journey, I think that that's definitely a good starting point. Whatever it is they want to work on. The programs that I currently have right now, and there's so many in my mind that I also want to create because there's just so much. This is something that we didn't really even touch on yet or at all, is my attachment healing masterclass. So a lot of people are familiar with attachment, right? Attachment style and all of that. And so in the masterclass, I believe it's a 6-week class. In there, I explain, you know, like I have the tools for you to see like what, if you don't already know, what attachment style you are, because that definitely goes into play in your relationships and, you know, how you show up in your relationships. I also have, with your help, Ashley, and this is how we got introduced, right? The toolkit, the self-love toolkit. There's also workbooks and journal prompts and a list of positive affirmations, a lot of things in there that will get them started on their self-love journey. And so I have that right now that's completed. And then I have another 6-week program similar to the attachment healing one. It's for how to create healthy boundaries. It's called the Boundary Breakthrough. It's also 6 weeks. And in there it explains the different types of boundaries, physical, emotional boundaries. There's all kinds of different types of boundaries that we can implement. Like my old client, right, that I mentioned earlier, the one that was married for 20 years or in a marriage for 20 years that lost herself. So like being able to create boundaries so that she would protect that part of herself, right? Some of the things that speaking up for herself or whatever that looks like in creating boundaries. And that's what that program does. And there's so many other ones that I have brewing for my client and the women that I work with. But right now, those are them.
Awesome. That sounds great. And I will definitely make sure that for those of you listening, I'll link all that Ray just mentioned. And then, Ray, for someone who, like I was 4 or 5 years ago, who was looking for exactly what you do, like someone to help me with the process of getting back to myself and finding authentic self and attracting the non-abusive, awesome partner and becoming a match for that and all of those things, because I know for some people, they will want that one-on-one. Do you do any one-on-one coaching hybrid? Do you do that? Because I know that's what I was looking for, and I just so happened to meet someone who knew someone, that type of thing. But I know there's got to be someone listening to this that's like, oh my gosh, does she do one-on-one, or can I contact her? Do you still do any of that? Or
Absolutely, yeah, I can provide a VIP 90-minute one-on-one for that client to get a roadmap of what their journey is going to look like and what it's going to entail. I do plan on in the future, as soon as I can free up a little bit more of my time, start a group coaching. I just combined two words at one time. A group coaching program. This work is so in depth that actually, right, firsthand. Like it's a journey, right? And so at least the 6-month program, I have the outline of it. I just haven't created it yet just because of the time constraints. And so that's something that I will offer in the future, which will encompass everything that you said with the work, all of that would be the group coaching program.
Awesome. Ladies who are listening and haven't heard me say this before, I have to say this again because I think this point cannot be missed, because I know that a lot of times in in business. And like what my clients come to me for is strategy and marketing and branding and all of those things. But what can't be missed for entrepreneurs, especially, is this type of inner work that makes you the type of person who can implement said strategies, hold their energy, be happy in your personal life, because again, all this translates. And the year that I invested the absolute most in my personal development, I mean, I literally was going to a therapist once a week and working with this life coach once a week, not to mention any books and all kinds of other things I was investing in, but I invested in myself and my healing the most that I ever had. That was also the year that I made by and far away the most money. I had the most cash flow that year. It was hard. It was going through a difficult time, but it was also such a beautiful time and much needed. And I think that's the foundation for a sustainable run as an entrepreneur, is doing that inner work. It can't be overlooked. I really don't know many people who are successful who haven't done some deep work. So if you're looking for someone to do that with, I highly recommend Rae, because even just sitting here chatting with her right now, I'm like, oh man, she has so much to offer and so much wisdom, and also walks her talk. So Rae, I'm super thankful for you. For high achieving women who are looking for a partner or who are evaluating the partner they have before making a further commitment, what's one green flag, something that they should look for? And then what's one red flag that a high achieving woman in particular should look for in a partner?
I like the green flag, as I mentioned that earlier. So the green flag is definitely that emotional safety. I imagine at least after a few months, you should be able to tell whether you feel emotionally safe with them. And what that will look like in the relationship is he open to your suggestion? How well does he listen to you? Do you feel comfortable expressing A, B, and C to him?
Mm-hmm.
And just asking yourself those questions like, how open are you with him? And if you're open and he listens and he makes you feel understood, oh, that's a green flag, because that is pointing to emotional safety, right? And that's so important in relationships. I mean, if you
Yep.
ask me, I would say that's one of the most important things in a relationship.
Agreed 100%. I would
Yeah.
say that for me, it's the non-negotiable.
Uh-huh. Yeah, absolutely.
Love that one. What about a red flag for a high achieving woman
A
looking
red
for?
flag, I would say there's a lot, but one that comes to mind is him allowing you to do it all.
Mm.
Right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you already do it all in your, as a high achiever entrepreneur, you're already doing it all in your business, especially solopreneurs, right?
Yeah.
And so when you notice that he's allowing you to, because a masculine man, if I'm assuming under the assumption that most women want masculine men, so
Mm-hmm.
a
Mm-hmm.
masculine man, like your partner, Ash, he's not going to allow you to do it all your own. He's going to want
No.
to help you.
Yep.
So what does that look like? Doing it all on your own. First of all, dating, planning the date, or on the date, making all the plans, not trying to assist you, not trying to help you, not trying to assist you. And definitely if he's the one asking. I mean, I've heard so many things. I laugh, I chuckle because I've heard so many things from women in terms of like, oh, they were dating for a few months and he asked for her to loan him $200 or something.
Uh-huh.
Something crazy like that, right? I'm like, okay,
Uh-huh. Yep.
major red flag, you know?
Yeah, that's a real concern. Is I can imagine, a high achieving woman, someone who's making a lot of money. Some men, not all, I think there's great men, just like there's great women and terrible women, but I think that some men may take advantage of that because they're like, oh, a sugar mama, it could even be that type of situation.
Yeah. And when we think about it, like, okay, yeah, of course, like that makes sense. They're asking you for money and you haven't even been dating for a few months, but
Hmm.
you'll be surprised in like how blinded we are by the love or by the
Yeah.
affection or by the feeling, right? The feeling of
Yes.
having someone, the feeling of having that someone. Because when you're dating with, I'm sure you've heard like the whole honeymoon phase. Well, there are
Hmm.
studies that we actually, during this phase, just like drugs set off your neurotransmitters of serotonin and dopamine and all the fun neurotransmitters, that's what a relationship does too. And so who wants to end that, right? By saying no or by recognizing that red flag. Go for it.
Absolutely. I'm the former queen of taking red flags and putting them into the shape of a heart and then moving forward. We're not doing that anymore, but that makes a lot of sense that our brain is in, especially if you say get engaged or married during that honeymoon period, then you're like, oh, wait a documented. All those things that I overlook, even if it's one or two things, they can become a lot larger deals down the line.
Down the line.
This is so interesting. Okay. I would recommend, because I know what's in the self-love toolkit, and that's something that I wish that I had had. And it's such an affordable resource and just jam-packed. So I recommend grabbing the self-love toolkit. But if someone doesn't grab the self-love toolkit, but they're wanting to cultivate that self-love, what's something from your professional expertise that you would recommend that someone do to cultivate that self-love, that self-acceptance, their authenticity? What's a practical tip?
There are so many ways to just show yourself some self-love, right? In small daily doses, like going out for a 5 or 10 minute walk. For some women, it's taking, for us, here, this is good. Like for us, entrepreneurs, high achieving, whatnot, taking a nap. Taking a nap. It's as simple
Yep.
as that, right?
Without
Like
feeling guilty.
without, yes,
Oh, so
yes.
hard, but it's so
It's
true.
so hard, but so true, right? Like
Hmm.
you can give yourself daily doses of self-love, taking care of yourself, right? Self-care,
Hmm.
self-love, 5 minutes of deep breathing, 5 minutes of being intentional, 5 minutes of meditating, even eating well, feeding your body nourishments, right? Keeping your body hydrated. Those are small acts of kindness to yourself,
Very
right?
true.
That small acts of kindness to your physical body, staying hydrated. So many research studies on how good water is for our brain.
Yeah.
Little things like that. One of the things that I practice is closing my eyes and breathing for 5 minutes, 5 or 10 minutes when I'm feeling overwhelmed or, overwhelmed by my to-do list. Those are small acts that you can
Oh,
do
those are
daily.
great. And it sounds like almost things that probably a lot of us are already doing, but just thinking of it from the perspective of caring for yourself, like drinking water. We might be drinking water from a place of, oh, I'll like lose weight if I drink all this water, or we'll go get our lash extensions done because we're like, oh, I look better. I don't want to look like a frog. Or I'm thinking of things I say to myself on occasion. And then I think, no, if I want to go get my nails done or get my eyelashes done, I want it to be from a place of, oh, this makes me feel good, not from beating ourselves up. So almost like just taking normal acts that we do, like taking a nap, but reframing it as like an act of
Reframing the
self-love.
script.
Yeah.
Yeah, reframing the script that you have in your mind to the reasons why you're doing it, right? It's like
Yeah.
you're doing, it changes everything.
Yeah.
Perspective for sure.
And then it doesn't feel like you're doing necessarily taking time to do something super extra, but just these little things could really add up. When you mentioned the
Mhm.
nap thing, I really struggle with that because sometimes I'm like, I want to take a nap, but I think about my to-do list.
Yeah.
No, I can't possibly do that, but it's a loving thing. What's 30 minutes going to do,
hmm
you know? So
hmm
just what would you advise someone that you love? The nap, girl, like take care of yourself and then get up and get at it. Wouldn't be like,
Yeah.
oh, are you sure you want to do that? That's kind of lazy. Like, not
Right, right. Yeah, I tell him like you deserve that now.
speaking to ourselves like we would be spoken to. That is so, so key.
hmm
So many simple things that are easier said than done sometimes. And that's why it's
Yeah,
good to have a coach in that area, right? That can remind you of these things and why you're doing them. And so I love the work that you do.
thank you. Yeah, that was a conversation I did have with the whole perspective thing when we
Uh-huh.
started, because her question was like, how do I value myself? How do I show
Mm,
myself? She knows how she wants to be valued by others, but how does she show? So what it came down to is appreciating herself, right? And showing appreciation. What are some of the things she does? And so we kind of got on this topic a little bit. And so she mentioned some of the things that she is doing, like you mentioned, right? Some of these things that she's already doing, but changing the perspective of, okay, well, yeah, I'm doing these things, but also recognizing them and appreciating yourself for doing them for yourself.
yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Makes a difference.
Is there anything that I haven't asked you today that you would like to add, or any final words of wisdom before we wrap up? You've shared so
Yeah,
much with us, and I don't want to take up all of your day. I could keep asking you questions
no
forever.
problem. It's a privilege being here. Yes, I love talking about this stuff. So why I do the work that I do. But I think one thing that I'd want to say is for the women that this resonates with, I want them to know that they don't have to choose between being successful in love and or business, right? That you can have both.
Mhm.
And I think that it's great with us being on here because we can definitely demonstrate that, right? Of having both. You can have the successful business or career, and you can have the loving relationship, and you can have the loving family as well. You can have it all. I think that whole mindset shift for me was what made me do everything that I needed to do to make this a reality. That's one thing that I want to hit home, if anything, for those that are struggling with that belief that they can't
I
or
love
that's
that.
not
Thank you.
possible.
That is the best way to wrap this up, it goes back to what we originally started talking about, which is that self-love, and there's no other way to get around it. One thing that I always want women to understand and know, because I did not for so long, whether you have 6 siblings or you're an only child, as women, so often we feel almost selfish for taking care of ourselves or for loving ourselves, like that's somehow a negative thing, but really everything falls apart if you don't. At least that's been my experience. I've done things both ways. I've literally disliked myself, bashed myself. If you know, you know, if you've been around a while, you know, but I've done things that way and then filled up my life with things to try to compensate for that lack of self-love. And no matter how good it looked on the outside, it was miserable and I wasn't feeling fulfilled and all those things. And it wasn't until I did the work to love myself, which feels like corny and cheesy and uncomfortable at first, but once you realize the impact and what that actually means and how much more capacity that then gives us to love others fully, to me, it's only logical. So it's nice to hear from a professional who knows this. Like, you've helped that make a lot more sense and tie into why self-love is a foundation for all these other things that we want, whether it's life or love or business. And I think that that's the most important thing. So I'm thankful for your time and your expertise. And I'll definitely make sure that I link everything, because I'm sure that my listeners are going to want to learn more from you. So I'll make sure I link all of that. Where's the best place as far as social media to connect with you these days?
Yeah, so my handle is Coaching with Rae.
Okay.
Spelled out. Yeah, Coaching with Rae. Or my website where their free resources are, coachingwithrae.com.
Okay, awesome. Well, Rae, I appreciate you so much, and I'm super thankful for your time. Thanks for being here.
Yes, thank you, Ashley.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got a ton of value. And if you did, I would really appreciate if you would rate, subscribe, and review this podcast. It really helps push out the message that I have to share with other female entrepreneurs. Thank you so much.